Morning, everyone. We're just waiting for people to filter through. We've got quite a large group joining us today, so just a few more moments and we will get started. I just wanted to check to see if Cynthia is online.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. We think you've
Yay.
used the participant rather than the panelist link to dial in. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you're here.
Yay.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, look, we seem to we've got pretty much, well, not quite everyone that said they were going to join, but we've got a really good number. We're up to about 30 so far and climbing. So I think I'll get started. Look, firstly, welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar series on behalf of the RPMA. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Tony Mitchell and I am the chair of the RPMA. I'm also out at the minute on site doing inspections and have paused to do my inspections to host and facilitate this webinar series. So this webinar series is about, well, it was due to be about providing a rate card for odd jobs, but what we actually discussed as council members over the last couple of weeks is that there's obviously a big challenge at the moment with rental properties. The market seems to be quite tough. So we thought, what better than having a couple of experts along and hearing from their experience, what they've done in the past and what they would recommend to do at a time like this. So look, we're looking forward to hearing about that, and I'll introduce our two panelists shortly. But look, just like yourself, I've been experiencing a bit of a downturn in the market at the minute, with rental prices being under pressure. We're seeing less demand from tenants, but we're also seeing that owners are expecting to get the same rental price in many cases, or even in some cases that I've had, they actually want a rental increase. So I've had some challenging conversations around that. It's as I said, it's a challenging time also because of winter. Typically, as we know, the property market slows down in winter. We've also had a lot of new builds that have flooded the market in various places within New Zealand, not just within Auckland, and that's put extra demand because you've got brand new properties that are on the market and quite a few of them in one hit. I've also experienced as well, from my own perspective, that the changes to the Tenancies Act, with now the tenants only being able to or being allowed to provide 21 days notice, has had a bit of a flow-on effect. I've had tenants give me 21 days notice, but when I've wanted tenants to come across, they've wanted to give their landlord 28 days notice. So it hasn't quite worked out as perfectly as we'd hoped, but it has put additional pressure on the property managers to make sure that you're finding tenants. And also, probably like me, you've noticed that tenants at the moment, there's a lot of opportunity for them to shop around, and that's leading them to, from my perspective, lead property managers on a bit. So they'll normally be waiting for their favorite property to come in, but they'll be trying to accept various offers just as backups. That's just, as we know, part of the game, but I think it is almost heightened at the moment given the market. So that's my perspective on some of the things that I'm seeing in the market. I'm really hoping that the likes of David Pearce and Cynthia Lamb will be able to really show us what they've seen, but also what they think we should be doing in the future. These two people actually need no introduction, but I'll give them a bit of introduction anyway. David, you will have seen before. He's a previous panelist. He's also the franchisor of Pukeko Rentals. He's the immediate past chair, and he's got a wealth of experience, not just in property management, but also in real estate. So welcome, David.
Thank you.
Next, we have Cynthia. Cynthia, you probably know Cynthia from being on our council, the RPMA Council. She's also a property management professional with much experience from various property management agencies, and also a big part of our education team when it comes to training level 4 education. So welcome, Cynthia. Pleasure to have you today. So
Thank
look, to
you.
kick things off, what I wanted to do is just pose a few questions to you both and get you to rotate with answering if that works okay. Look, the first question, and David, I'll go to you, is around what I've identified what I see as the key factors in the market, but what do you see as the key factors that's impacting the market being a little bit tougher? And have you seen anything like this before?
Right. Yes, I have seen this before. This is about when I was in Auckland, about 2012. It was exactly like this. And so it's cyclical. So it's nothing to get overly concerned about. Yeah, so, and I think it comes down to affordability. In Hawke's Bay, we are usually a bit immune because our council doesn't want to use 1 square metre of agricultural land for housing. So we don't have big, huge new housing, but we're actually finding it very tough in the up end of the market. So people $850 to $1,000, they're finding it very, very tough at the moment to fill those places when the tenant leaves. So for me, it's it's more affordability and tenants having a good look around to see if they can get something cheaper.
Thank you. Cynthia.
So I'm in Auckland. And as you know, Tony, that in Auckland it's been very quiet, and I think it's due to obviously a lot of demand, a lot of supply available and less demand. Like David, I've seen it in 2012 as well. I wasn't a property manager back then, but I was a landlord. I remember my property in Panmure of Auckland has been vacant for like 4 months back then, which was really, really hurting. But it all comes down to the right price and the right tenant. Obviously, like back then I kept on like decrease the weekly rent till someone good is willing to rent the property. Yeah.
Very good. I've got a bit of a curveball here because I couldn't help but bring up the Trump factor and what's going on globally with the disruption that he's bringing to the market. Look, actually, the last week, we've had a lot of "I told you so" from the Trump supporters with all of the changes that they're bringing into place, and now some of the tariff deals are happening. Pharmaceutical prices, he's saying he's going to bring those down. And we've really seen the share markets uh, rise up again over the last week or so. Do you see that as any influence on the New Zealand market on rentals? I mean, the economy is going to get better. Will people more jobs be available? Is the Trump factor playing a card in this, David?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I watch that with interest. I don't think it's going to have a huge effect on New Zealand. If anything, any tariff would be probably 10%. So that's not a major issue. It comes down to, for me, I'm surprised that with the lower interest rates and the housing prices the way they are, I'm surprised that why landlords aren't taking the opportunity to buy. In our particular area, from what I hear, it's tenants who are purchasing at the moment and seeing the opportunity with good pricing to buy, and that's why I'm finding that I've got empty properties is because they're actually telling me I'm great time to buy. So, but investors, I don't know what we need to do. It might be that nervousness about the macro things that are stopping them from also getting into the market at this point in time.
Any thoughts from you, Cynthia?
I find it quite interesting lately because in the last cycle, if we think about the property cycle, that when the interest rate decreased, like the property market seems to be reasonably hot. But I don't see it as much this time. Like I see not a lot of investors getting in. Like the people who are buying right now are probably homeowners. But then because the state of economy in New Zealand is also not great at the moment. So what I've been seeing is that like people will move back in with their family and like or potentially like share a larger house rather than renting separately because they need to save cost.
Good feedback. And look, I guess from my perspective, I saw February last year, there was a bit of a shake-up, and it really happened during 2024. Interest rates were really, really high. Cost of building was high. A lot of people that had speculated on properties were moving them on. But we're in a different position now, and interest rates are coming down. There's been a slowdown in builds. And I think you're right. Tenants are starting to look to buy properties, and because they can now afford it and cash in a bit of KiwiSaver, but the market is now starting to trend up. So look, I think I think yeah, I don't think the Trump factor's had too much of an issue in New Zealand just yet, but it could have if things went horribly wrong. Look, I'll just remind everyone to ask if they want any questions asked, please pop them in the chat, and I'll make sure I fire them through to the panelists as and when they come through. Okay, so we've had a bit of a talk about some of the factors that are impacting the market, but I'm interested to see or hear from your perspectives, given you've been through this before, what you think the mistakes are that property managers make in a time like this. What do you think they get wrong? David.
Yeah, I think the greatest thing is actually having I'll start again. Basically, with sales, if it's a buyer's market and it's a seller's market, then real estate people adjust accordingly to that. I think the biggest problem at the moment is property managers is just doing what they have done over the last 2 or 3 years, expecting that there'll be a great selection of tenants to choose from, and there's not. So really, it starts from a checkup from the neck up, really, and just the way you actually are having a look at it. I think that's really important. So instead of just thinking, oh, well, there'll be someone there, I think we've got to actually get a lot more motivated, a lot more urgency to actually dealing with anybody who actually shows interest or makes an inquiry. We can't afford just to actually, I'll get round to that. It's got to be the first priority. And I think that mindset and removing that casual attitude is the key thing. And it's also, just so it's got to be a urgency with the management applications or inquiries. If you get somebody that in the application that looks good, move quickly to do the urgency of the credit checks, communicate with the owners quickly so you can get an answer back if you're referring with, talking with them, and update the community. We've got to actually be more communicative to the tenants, letting them know, thank you for your application. This is what you need to do. Just be more proactive, I think, because we really need to get that gold. It's looking for gold, and when you find it, you want to get it on board and put it in your pocket as quickly as possible.
Right, that's good for the proactive property managers. So if you're not fast, you're last, is what you're saying in that regard. Absolutely.
Well, the thing is that they're looking around. So if they don't hear from you or get offered a property, they only stop looking if they've been offered. If they haven't been offered, they're always looking, oh, well, I might have got that. So I'm always looking elsewhere. And we've got to try and get them focused on your property.
Absolutely. Cynthia, anything to add to that?
So where I work, like the biggest complaint ever is about communication, because property managers fail to probably communicate to the landlord. Sometimes the landlord feels very much in the dark. Like, say, if they give you a listing, you list it online, and possibly they wouldn't hear back from you for 3 to 4 weeks sometimes. And that's not really, really good. Like, even though you can't control if you can't rent a property out, no one wants that property. That's probably something that like maybe it's the property itself, like had some issues, or it's expensive or whatever. You just need to constantly give that feedback to the owner. And also as property manager, have you revisit the actual Trade Me ad? Like, have you revisit the ad? Have you looked at it? Have you looked at, like, for example, if you scroll right down, how many people looked at the ad? So when I was doing some research for this webinar, it happened to be, I think it was on Monday. Someone reached out to me, just a personal contact, and asked, hey, now I have this listing available, and it's listed with a very large agency in Auckland. Can you have a look at it for me and see if there's any issues? And she gave me the address of the property, and then I look on the ad on TradeMe. Basically, the description was like pretty bad. It was all wrong. Like it was a 6-bedroom and 4-bathroom house, but the property manager described it as 5-bedroom and 3 bathrooms. So there's a bathroom and a bedroom missing. And most of all, like there isn't a lot of like description on the listing itself. And the views of that listing was only around 100 views, and it's been listed for 3 months. Now, you have to look at, as a property manager, not only communicating, but you also have to look at how your listing is doing, the performance of your listing. Because if there's no one looking at the ad, this like there will be no one coming to viewings either. And you couldn't, like, it would be really, really hard to rent it out that way. So I think that's something that some property managers will need to improve on.
Very good. So look, someone once told me that if your property is not moving or you're not getting people along, the price is too high. And that's yes, that's true. But at what cost? So I think you're absolutely right. There's other things that you should be looking at as well. Just as you've said with regards to the ad, to the photos, does it need to be taken down for a week and relisted? And does it actually need a price change as well? So, I'd encourage people to use ChatGPT just to run their existing ad through it. I'm sure most of you are already, but it will pick up a lot of things, and you can then ask it to give you something that's a bit more colourful, a bit more vibrant, or whatever it is, and it does a wonderful job. But the other thought for myself is that the tenants have been quite picky, and so they are now know that they can take a bit more time and find issues with the properties that they're looking at and ask for things to be done for them to move in. And I think that's great in a way, because it means that I can then proactively engage the owner and say, look, there are these 5 things which you've been wanting to do for the property. Let's do them now. Yes, it's going to cost you, but you're going to get that rent coming in earlier. So it's an opportunity to get some of those improvements, some of those nagging maintenance things that were on the fence. It's an opportunity to get those done. So yeah, it's a good way to have that proactive conversation with the owner, and also get a tenant that will hopefully stay a long time because they've got the property that they want with the changes made to it. Just checking for the chat. Just can't see any questions come through yet. Okay.
If I follow on from Cynthia about the communication, what I actually personally do is that I actually send the Trade Me weekly reports, which show the number of people who've gone online. I send that to the owners, and I try and focus on getting their expectations within reason, because they're not just going to go up an extra 10 or 20% this year like they have in the past. So it's a matter of getting them to understand that. But by sending those reports out, you're actually conditioning them. And the other thing is that you're going into a market where you need to actually talk about it. So if it isn't, because inquiries come in when you first do the ad, there's the bulk of who's looking for that particular property, and then it just goes right off and it just dwindles at any new people later. You've really got to actually make the most of that first hub cycle, that inquiry that comes in. And owners need to realize that. It's like when you put your house on the market for the first time. The first big hit is going to come when you first advertise it. So I think that after a while you need to say, well, look, if it isn't rented out within a certain period of time, come to an agreement with them where we actually need to reduce the rent by $20 or $50 a week or whatever until we actually start getting some hits. Because if you do the calculations, if a property is empty for 2 months, that's what they would have been better off taking a less rent at the start and getting that whole rent over the whole year. And these are the sort of things you need to get owners to think about. It's not just a matter of getting the highest rent, it's what's going to give them the return for the 12 months. And that's really important.
Yeah, and sometimes I guess owners have to go through that pain to understand it, unfortunately. But definitely you've got to keep up the communication with them. The other point regarding the price and the first week is absolutely paramount for people for viewing it. But if you can't get the owner to budge and you've got to list at that price, your point about then talking to them and getting a price reduction after a week or 2 weeks, you know, that will give another boost, because people then get notified through Trade Me that something on their watch list has now come down $5 or $10 a week. So, you know, there's a second opportunity there if you can't get them to list at the right price, but ideally list at the right price to start with.
Yeah.
Just a thought for you two. What do you think the right number of people viewing a property is if you've got everything right? You've got the photos, you've got the ad, and you've got the price right. I guess from my experience in the past, you know, I've gone from, you know, getting 0 to 25 people, and the 25 people all turned up. So there's a big range there with what you've got to play with. But how do you know when you've got it right?
Your turn, Cynthia.
Now, I think it's hard to get it like exactly right, first of all. I'm not sure, like those of you online, like I think it would be really interesting to know as well. Like, have you like try and list a property, say, if you listed it at say 750 and you think it's the right average for the area. And then like within an hour, you have like 20 inquiries come through, and then you would be like, oh, oops, maybe it's a little bit low. Maybe I can set it higher. I'm not sure if anyone has the same experience, but like it's really, really hard to get it right, because property is such a unique thing. Um, right? Like each property is slightly different, like besides those terrace house which all look the same. But they will be slightly different. But like it really it's hard to know. But what I find is that if there's more than 5 groups who came to the viewing, and if the property have no major issues, like for example the photos are not from 10 years ago, and or when it's listed for sale, and the reality looks vastly different, then I would say if there's like 5 to 7 groups who came through, like that kind of like drives the competitiveness between the tenants, and it would usually be okay the first time. Yeah, it's just
That's
like
what
also making sure that it's well presented as well.
That's what I've sort of heard as well. Something you're about if you're getting 5 to 7 and maybe 1 or 2 applications, you know, you've kind of got the stretch right with regards to the price, but you've got the marketing right as well. But I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, David.
No.
Very good.
I haven't. But yeah, at the moment we're actually looking at that 2012 situation. We're there again. So my next point will be, and what I did then is that if I actually think that the rent's okay and there's competitives, at that time it was apartments were very, very difficult to rent out. So there were a couple of things that I did that I found out worked extremely well back then. And one was offering a 3 weeks rent to try and get them to actually make contact with you rather than choose something else. And it just means that they start the tenancy and that, but they don't start paying a week later. I found that that was a really good tool to use. And the other thing is what I found is that I was able to rent apartments in the central Auckland when others couldn't have been empty for a month, is because I changed my showing times. So, you know, you've got to actually show the properties when it's convenient for the tenant, and it might mean an evening, it might, you know, after 4:35, or it might mean that you do it on a Saturday or Sunday. Now, it's very difficult for those in offices, but I think that's huge because you actually make it available for them to view instead of trying to take up time off work and things like that.
Yeah, look, and you're right. You might actually even be even more flexible and just go and show them when they want to. In a few cases, I've done that. Not in all, because it's not an efficient use of your time, but in a tough market, sometimes you have to pull out all stops. And if they want to meet, you know, this afternoon at 3 p.m., you meet this afternoon at 3 p.m.
Yeah, no, I used to do that as well. But one bit of advice is like a doctor or a dentist, an hour before send out, are you going to come? Yes or no? If you don't say yes, I'm not getting in the car. and because there's nothing worse of going a quarter of an hour earlier, opening up, and then quarter of an hour past saying, well, why aren't you here? Oh, because they still think that they're in a cattle class situation where there's going to be 50 people there. And if they don't turn up, then it doesn't matter. So you need to actually try and be smart with that as well.
Anything to add, Cynthia, on that?
Yes, and also like to respond quickly to inquiries. That's more like you can say it's a sales tactics or whatever, but like respond quickly if they before they see the property, if they have any questions, respond quickly and politely. Afterwards, like send application links and ensure they fill it in quickly, close the deal quickly. Like it's almost like so bad to say that, but don't really give them a lot of time to see other properties the next day or the weekend. Just close the deal quickly if they're good tenants.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else that either of you would like to add before I looked for any more questions from the
Yeah,
audience?
I have. I think it's time. I know that a lot of companies pulled back from using rent signs because they had to put the price in and the government made it difficult. I actually think it's time for rent signs to come back. I think that's just another way. We've had the luxury of not needing them because we're getting the inquiries anyway, but we're actually in a different market now. So to have a rent sign, especially on a busy or traffic route, is going to make a huge difference, possibly to renting out that property a little bit sooner. Yeah, have you got one, Cynthia, or I've got a couple more.
Like if any of you work in an office that has a sales, with a sales business, like a real estate sales business, these agents will often know who has been given notice by their landlord. And like those tenants would be looking, obviously, like if the property is up for sale, they'll be looking to move. And it's quite a good source of information if you send them available rentals as well. And I've also heard that people have been like walking around in the neighborhood just giving out, like just putting flyers. It works in some smaller communities.
Another one to think about, because the government's already talking about it, is if your owner doesn't mind, and you might need to do some negotiating, but put in there that pets could be considered. Because most people
Pets
just tick the
negotiable,
box. Yeah, pets negotiable, because a lot of them don't do it. I think we've got to the stage now where we need to be open-minded, because if you have a property that's not renting and you do the talk to the previous landlord and there's been no trouble with the pet, then I think you need to actually, that's an option to try and get more people to looking at your property. Because we can't fussy just to say, oh, no pets, and then just picking from out of those ones anymore. And finally, the use of virtual tours. I use them as often as I can now, where people can go online and look around the property, and that's been ideal for people who are out of town. I've got one property in Hawke's Bay where people from Auckland and Christchurch are applying for the property because they can go around and have a look without actually viewing it.
Brilliant. All right. Well, look, I have had a question come in. This is good. This is our first, and we're getting towards the 1/2 mark. Okay. Appreciate your thoughts on hanging on to less than we would appreciate your thoughts on hanging on to a less than tidy tenant who is at least paying the rent in today's market. It's a love-hate relationship. Who wants to go first? Cynthia? Given your background in tenancy tribunal cases.
Depends on how less than tidy. If like it's hard. Like if the property, and also it's related to the property condition as well, right? If the tenant's less than tidy, and if the property is not in top-notch condition, then you have to think about, okay, if this tenant's gone in this market, then would you be able to get the same money? And also, I think I chatted with someone from the level 4 group last cohort, must be like yesterday. Like if you really want to get rid of a tenant and say like no cause termination because of that they are not really tidy or whatever, you don't have firstly, you don't have to give them a reason, but you have to think that currently it's May, and if you give them 90 days notice, it goes like right in the middle of the winter? And are you sure you can re-tenant that quite quickly, or would you wait till the market and the temperature is a bit warmer, then you give that notice? That would be my answer. It's that time frame is very important.
Any thoughts, David?
You know, I agree. That's a good answer. I think at the end of the day, as long as they're not doing damage to the property, if it's just untidiness, I would probably persevere and try and educate the tidies, explaining to them that they have to be reasonably clean and reasonably tidy. And I would probably put them on a monthly inspection to actually make sure that they up their game. That's worked for me in the past very well. But yeah, you wouldn't want to actually throw them out and then find out that you've got a couple of months with no rent coming in.
Yeah, sound advice from both of you. I think you've also you've got to make sure you're documenting everything in a case like this. You don't want it to come back and the owner holds property management to account for not having done their job, for keeping a tenant and the property's been damaged. So, make sure you're documenting, having good inspections, giving good feedback, as you said, and talking to the owner. But, I'd be erring on the side of like working with that tenant to get it up to speed. That said, when I've actually changed out some tenants, oh my goodness, you get a good tenant, life becomes a lot easier as a property manager, but you've got to pick your moment when to do that.
And that's where I had trouble with the Labor government when they said that, we're willingly kicking out tenants. Well, you have a good tenant, you're not willingly kicking them out. You want to hold on to them.
Fantastic. All right. Look, I'll get each of you to give me your top 3 things that property managers should do. You probably mentioned them already, but I'll just give a quick summary from what we've seen so far. But look, overall, what we're hearing is that there's a temporary rebalancing going on in the market, and so we are seeing at the moment things are a little bit tight. But with interest rates coming back, and we're seeing immigration improving, and we're seeing new builds slowing, we're going to see the demand supply come to a better equilibrium. So this is a short-term phase that we believe property managers are going through and the market's going through. There's been some great advice from the panelists. Check the ads, respond quickly, get improvements done, and perhaps offer a week's free rent. So those are 4 from me that I'd choose. But let's hear from David and Cynthia as to what they think their top 3 would be. Obviously, they want you to do it all, but if there was only 3, what would they be? Who'd like to go first?
I can go first. Sure. Okay. I would say to elaborate on the viewing times, like more viewing times available. So one of the business that I've known, like they do viewings morning, afternoon, evening in order to like rent houses out quickly. Of course, not everyone has the scale to do that because that's a relatively large business, but like more viewing times available, definitely. If you only have one viewing time available and that's on Monday, 9 o'clock in the morning, I don't think you can get it rented that easily. Okay, first of all, viewing times. Secondly, it's like communication. I think like quick response is the key in this market, whether to landlords or to tenants. And then number 3 is that make sure that the property is presentable before you go and show the prospective tenants. Have you been in the property? Is that filthy, or like is that in a state where you think you would want to live in? So those are my 3 points that I want to
Thank you. David?
Yeah, well, I'll try and pick some others, but I actually think the showing terms is correct. I think in this market at the moment, I'm showing someone at 4 o'clock this afternoon because they've finished work then. And sometimes I've done 1 o'clock on a Saturday or Sunday just to actually make sure I get people along. I think we're getting to a stage at this at the moment where your property wants to be on their list, so you want a free rent incentive. I think I would recommend that you do that, but you need to discuss that with the owner. And then finally, consider pets. That they're optional, and when you actually get more people who are inquiring, especially if they've elderly, who it's like a child to them. And to me, I've found out my experiences is when it comes with pets, it's all about the owner, not the pet. And if you get the owner right and they all look after it, and it's their pet and it's their baby, then I don't think you're going to have much problem. So consider that.
Thank you. Look, there's plenty there for people to work with, and I really appreciate your expertise and insights for the people that are online. We haven't had any more questions come in. That means that there must be, you must have answered just about everything. We've recorded this meeting as well, and so I will get a summary that should be available on the website as well. But again, thank you very much for your time today, David and Cynthia. Pleasure to have you here. And I hope for everyone online that they've managed to gain some insights and can go and rent those properties that they're having a few challenges with. All right. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.